Hi everyone, welcome. I'm your host, Lindsay, and I am here with Will and Jenni. This is fourth and fifth generation here at White Oak Pastures. We are in Bluffton, Georgia, and you guys have just been pioneers and just the head of this regenerative agricultural movement. And I really appreciate you guys, not only because you care about, the health of the land, the health of the soil, but what really feels good for me is that actually contributes to the health of the meat that we're eating from a nutritionist standpoint. So maybe real quick, briefly, we'll just go over what regenerative agriculture is, if you don't mind sharing.
Regenerative agriculture to me is restarting the cycles of nature that create the abundance. Mm-hmm. The abundance is the wealth, like the coal and oil and gas in the ground, mm-hmm. or the fruit off a tree. Mm-hmm. All these things were created by the cycles of nature working optimally. Mm-hmm. The energy cycle from the sun, mm-hmm. the water cycle from the rain, the mineral cycle in the soil, the microbial cycle, the animal cycle, on and on, many, many cycles. Mm-hmm. And when they're all operating as they should, an abundance is created, and that's what we live on.
Mm-hmm. And I know often, you refer in your book a lot, it's called The Bold Return, right? Is it Giving a Damn? That's
Bold
right,
yeah.
So they have that, it's on their website too. I've linked their website down below so you guys can follow along throughout this interview. But I hear often that, there's a lot of complexities that happen in nature. And what's wild is that the approach to farming could just be very simple in the sense that you just kind of leave it alone, and your job is almost getting out of the way of nature and just being a sort of guide to mimicking what nature is supposed to do in a more controlled environment.
Yeah. Since World War II, my dad's generation and my generation have made food production, agriculture very linear.
Right.
And it's not meant to be. It's mm-hmm. meant to be very cyclical.
Right.
But that didn't fit the model, the post-World War II industrial model. Mm-hmm. So we changed it. And when we changed it, there were unintended consequences that weren't good. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Talk about when you went to college, the theme of your education was anything ending in side. It was all about how to kill things and control them, mm-hmm. as opposed to, working with them and mentoring them and guiding them and allowing them to evolve as they, naturally would.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that gets to that linear versus cyclical. Mm-hmm. In the industrial model that I participated in for 20 years, it was all about creating a monoculture, mm-hmm. in my case of only cattle, mm-hmm. eating only Tifton 85 Bermuda grass. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you were in my pasture and you weren't a cow, mm-hmm. and you weren't Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, mm-hmm. I was going to kill you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I used pesticide. Side means kill, homicide, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
So I used insecticide, herbicide, nematicide, mm-hmm. Decides. And that was I thought that was exactly what I was supposed to be doing, and I really enjoyed it, and I was good at it. But the fact is, when I was doing that, I was breaking that cyclical system that's so beautiful. And when I would kill something else would result, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. and then I would kill it, mm-hmm. and something else would result. Mm-hmm. And it's just never ending.
It's like the game of whack-a-mole. You're just like, boom, something else is coming out.
And I think that has become very intentional. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the early pioneers in linear agriculture were so smart. They said, and let's sell them this stuff that kills things and it'll make something. That didn't happen.
Right.
But at some point, mm-hmm. people figured it out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that the way the industry has evolved is that big multinational companies sell us poisons that mm-hmm. kill things knowing that there will be something else that results from that, that they will be able to sell a poison to kill,
Right.
knowing there will be another one, and it's never ending.
Right. And I see there's just so many similarities in the health and wellness field too of linear thinking, where it's like, oh, there's a pill for that, instead of thinking that it is a cycle. It is, an ecosystem of, exercising and of eating right and putting the right foods in your body so that your body can essentially do as intended, right? Just as nature intended, your body should be doing as intended too if you just feed it very simply.
There are many similarities, and there's some of the same perpetrators.
Right.
The big drug companies and the big ag companies are the same.
Yeah, and I think the health of not only the land, but the health of human too, does come from the origin of it all, right? So not only from the soil, but also where you are sourcing your food. And this is why I love White Oak Pastures so much, is because we talked about this. It's not that you guys have the perfect model, right? It's just that you guys are doing the best you can, but you are transparent about it. I can have a relationship with you. Somebody that is consuming your meat and your beef, I can just talk with you. I can come here. I can, explore tours. You guys can tell me all the things from, being transparent from a financial standpoint to what you feed your cattle and cows and how you even progress moving forward. So I really appreciate the transparency in that. So as consumers, go to source their foods, what are some of the steps that they can do to begin those conversations with their local farmers? If it's not White Oak, how does somebody begin to start to just conversations with their local farmers?
Well, sadly, you got to look for it. I mean, sadly, a local food provider that's doing what they're really supposed to do for the land and the animals and the consumer, it's not going to be a household word, probably. And it needs to be the more local, the better. We sadly, we ship product to 48 states, but we don't want to. We need to sell this amount of stuff to make our business work, keep our people busy, make our debt service, sell what our land produces. And I don't have enough business in Bluffton, Georgia. So people in Seattle, Washington can find somebody around Seattle, Washington, people in Bangor, Maine, and people in Las Cruces. You just have to, you got to look, sadly,
Right.
and find that person, form that relationship, and let it be a partnership.
And here's the good news: we have the internet these days, so it does, eliminate some of that, time really to actually go out there and search for them. It does still take a little bit of research that you can go online. I know you guys even have some resources online too, to help people navigate. So when it comes to them reaching out to their farmers, though, like I said, nobody really has a perfect model, and maybe they are feeding cows, corn fed or whatever. Do you feel like that would be a better option to have that conversation with, maybe those, the livestock that is fed grain, as opposed to going to the grocery store and having no idea where it's coming from?
Yeah, I mean, all farmers farm a little differently, and all consumers consume a little differently. We've got customers that are all about the welfare of the animal and don't really care too much about what the animal is, if it ate corn or not. We've got other customers that are all about grass-fed production and don't care too much if, you've just got to find a farmer whose practices are consistent with your preferences.
Right. So, just kind of finding whether it's a doctor or a personal trainer, this relationship can work. I align with your values, or maybe, toothpaste, you just align with a specific, flavor and brand, and that's your brand, and not mint is not for everybody, Jenny, did you want to tell us about the fact that if they go to the grocery store and there's all of these different brands, right? Because I also we can go on whiteoakpastures.com and we can see kind of what you guys do here, right? You run a beautiful farm, and I know there's plenty of information out there too on what we do here on the farm. But as a consumer, it's like, okay, how can consumers make better choices, not only to vote with their dollar, but also when they go to the grocery store and they look at all these different labels, they look at all these different brands, it's like grass-fed this, pasture-raised this, and none of it holds weight because it's not transparent, or it's like it's fooling the customer. And so many people get really frustrated or discouraged about it. So did you want to talk about maybe just a few of the companies that own essentially most of the grocery store shelves and how to navigate labels?
So one of the things that I have been really interested in is the centralization of food. And there are 4 major packers that allegedly supply something like 85% of the beef that's available to consumers. And so as a consumer, you go into a retail outlet and you believe that you have choice, when in reality, you don't have choice. It's the same people, just another label. And so when we're asked for advice, we always say, don't look at the label, go talk to the farmer. If 4 people are producing 85% of the beef that's in the grocery store, you're far better off having a relationship with someone who's truly producing the food.
Right, exactly. I mean, even if you go there and you do your own research and, you find the brand you like, go find who is making it and call them. It doesn't have to be like, oh, this person said this, or Lindsay said I shouldn't, buy from them. No, call, start making, conversation. And then, like you said, see if you align with their practices. And if you do, go for it. My intention here is just so that people are more informed so that they can make educational choices of who they want to support, and also align with, what the company that they feel like aligns with their values. I think disease, like heart disease and obesity, are skyrocketed now, are at the highest rates ever. And I think a lot of it has to do with us just being disconnected from where we source our foods from, and large corporations and companies are prioritizing more profits over health, and that's health of the human body and health of the land. And as you mentioned too, there are people out there that are, banking on sickness stemming from one thing, so that, consumers will need to take another pill to do something else too.
20 years ago, we were starting to get a little traction in the marketplace, and people would come to see us. And we're rural. We're 3.5 hours from Atlanta. We're rural. And people would go to the trouble of coming here to see what we did, and we didn't have time to show them. And they would come and say, "Can you show them around?" I don't have time. So we realized the importance, and we built infrastructure to handle it. It's 15 miles to a place to eat from right here. So we built a restaurant. And it's 40 miles to a decent hotel, so we built lodging. And we built a store, and we built an RV park, and we just added and added and added. And we did that because we came to appreciate that people want to know more about how the food's produced. And there's a multiplier effect. Everybody that buys our product's not going to come to the farm. But I think that the people that don't come are comforted by the fact that they know they could. They know that there's 24 people on this farm right now, looking and scratching and sniffing, and it's fine. They go anywhere they want to go. And if there's 24 here, there's 200 times that out there that'll be influenced by the fact that they went and were satisfied.
Yeah, the open door policy, again, just knowing that you're able to do that.
Well, we
does
want
feel
that.
Yeah.
We want people to be connected to their food system. We're advocates that, you should be connected to your food system. You have relationships with your children's teacher and your medical doctor and your tax accountant, but not the person who's growing your food. I could argue that that's more important than any of the others.
Right, I agree. And yeah, as it relates to health and wellness too, for me, it's like, I don't want people to feel disconnected from their bodies. And one of the things that I do that you guys are aware of is animal-based, right? I eat meat and dairy and mostly animal products, and then I include some, fruits and things like that. And it's not because I feel like that should be the only diet for everybody, just like you said about farming as well. But I feel that it's a good place to start because it gets rid of a lot of the noise, right? A lot of the pills that people are taking, or, again, as it relates to just in parallel to the farm, a lot of the, chemicals that are being sprayed on. Just see what happens to your farm, or see what happens to you as a person. And if there's little things that your body is expressing, then that's something that, all right, like maybe, I don't know, let's just say rice is making me feel bloated and undesirable feelings and emotions, so I'll stay away from that, right? Not everybody, some people feel good on rice, and that's great. But giving yourself a baseline with those simple, sort of ingredients is something where you start to listen now more to your body, you start to connect to your body. And then, my path has been quite some time. I've been a martial artist since I was 5 and a gymnast, so I've always fueled for performance. And then I was diagnosed with celiac disease, so allergy to gluten, wheat, and grain and all of that. And that was my essential deep dive into the ingredients. Like, there's wheat in everything. Okay, there's this. What else are they putting in our food? Wow, like this causes cancer. Okay, so like looking at all of these different ingredients in an ultra processed world, it's so confusing. And then you want to, go, okay, well, this person told me eat this. And it's like, wait, get rid of all the mess and start listening to your body. And so I think that when you, there's Traxie.
He's
She's
right.
fine.
He's fine.
Yeah. So when you do that, again, you start to understand what's best for you. And I think by removing all of the brand labeling, all of the, not only brand labeling, but it's made here and made there. And like we can talk about made in the US too, and how that's false or whatever. And you start to even just source from farmers that you have that connection with, and the grass fed and the grass finished. You start to learn, actually, this is the most nutrient dense meat and food that you can get for your body. So, it's a process to go down, just sort of not only food and then ingredients, but even diving deeper into actually the quality of the foods. So I know you also speak about the cycle a lot, right? Birth, growth, death, decay. Am I right?
Birth, growth, death, decay.
Birth, growth, right.
Decay.
The circle of life. And I think that, could be cyclical too in human health as well. So talk to us a little bit about maybe that process, because it does relate to just the nutrient density into the soil, the nutrient density in the final product of the meat, of what we actually put in our bodies.
We do try to stay very focused on the fact that there is birth, growth, death, decay. Mm-hmm. And the cattle that are out there grazing grass are urinating and defecating, and ultimately they'll be slaughtered, and then their remains will be spread back to feed the microflora and fauna in the soil. That'll feed the plant, they'll feed the next animal, and on and on and on in perpetuity. And what's lost is that when those cycles are allowed to fully manifest themselves, things literally just get better and better. Our land here is up to 5% organic matter. You hear a lot of talk about organic matter, and it's important. It's not all that matters, but it's very measurable. It's not any more important than dozens of other things, but it's measurable. When I started, when I changed the way I managed this farm 25 years ago, maybe more than that now, we were at a 0.5% organic matter. And because of feeding those cycles of nature, it's gone from 0.5% to 5%, 10x increase. And that just has incredible impact on the quality of the food that's produced here. You know, just from a water perspective. Again, water's not all that's important, but it's easy to focus on and measure. If you've got a 1% organic matter in the soil, it'll hold a 1-inch rain event. 5% will hold a 5-inch rain event.
Right.
And we get 5-inch rain events.
Yeah.
So.
Right. It's holding that in. Great. Yeah. And I mean, obviously the health of the soil really translates to just, you know, the health of the meat, and also the quality of taste. We were cooking yesterday too, a ribeye, and, you know, grass-fed is definitely different than corn-fed ribeye, but stay tuned on my YouTube, hit the subscribe and notification bell too when that recipe drops, because Lewis, your guys' chef, is amazing. And so one of the other things I love about White Oak is not only the attention to detail to soil, to farmland, but you guys are truly passionate about your employees too. And so, as I mentioned too, Lewis is just like, he's amazing.
The White Oak Pastures is better because Lewis is here.
Yeah.
And that's true for so many people that work here. You know, I guess the real unintended thing that happened in rebuilding this food system was the building of a community around food. And we should have known that might happen, but it was just never part of the conversations earlier, you know, when we were kind of in that process. But the very idea that we're kind of all bound by food, and Lewis came here by way of, you know, a love for culinary, and, you know, Bridget came here by way of a love for livestock. You know, Ricardo came here by way of processing. You know, Buck came here by way of processing. Walker came here by way of technology. You know, and we're kind of all bound with this common theme, which is producing really good food. But the different personalities and the different people that it's attracted has created such a strong and vibrant community that, you know, I feel blessed to be able to raise my children here.
Yeah, and one thing, just kind of talking with everybody too, that is like a common theme is just, you know, anytime you mention like lab created meat or like, you know, fake food, it's like, oh no, you know. And I think that's the main thing. No matter what you eat, veggies, like I don't care what you eat, but as long as it's real, right? So let's talk about another sort of pain point for the consumer too. You know, maybe they're listening in and they say, okay, great, you know, this sounds amazing. Like I want to connect with my farmer. I want to vote for those who are really working on regenerating the land so that, you know, we can continue to feed ourselves for generation to generation to generation, right? Not deplete the very land that feeds us. But let's talk about cost and money. It can be expensive as a consumer to pay for the quality of the meat. So maybe we can talk about either the value of the dollar that is spent, or maybe how cheaper meat translates to cost later in the long term.
Yeah, we sadly, we are addicted to obscenely cheap food. And the food is really not as cheap as the price reflects at the store. There's a lot of cost in industrial production that's spun off that doesn't get paid by the producer of the food or the consumer of the food. It's spun off to the rest of us. I talk about there's a huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, as big as the state of Massachusetts, where nothing lives. And I mean, and that was caused by chemical fertilizer and pesticides running down the Mississippi River. Now, the people that made and applied those pesticides aren't going to pay for that dead zone in the Gulf. Well, how much would that cost? A space in the food producing Gulf of Mexico that's dead. It's a huge cost to clean it up. And that cost won't be borne by the pesticide companies or the fertilizer companies or the farmers. It'll be borne by all of us. Those costs are just spread out. The species extinction. Every species of plant or animal or microbe that's on the planet is here for a purpose, and it has a role. We may not recognize it, but it does. And we've driven countless species of plants and animals and microbes into extinction, and the pesticide company isn't going to pay for that. We're all going to suffer that cost. The microplastics in the environment, on and on and on. We can name, don't even get into climate change. All these things that we have done that are adverse to the quality of life for the species, the perpetrator's not paying for it. Everybody pays for it. So that's horrible.
Yeah, and then the pesticides too, and all the sides essentially in the runoffs are getting into the water system. I mean, where do you think that's going? Maybe we're drinking it, we're bathing in it, and so we are paying for it as well too, with how it affects our health, like our hormones and just even skin health. There's so many people that do look towards products or pills in order to fix something where it could also be from the runoff. And so we don't think of these things as a whole ecosystem. Once again, going back to the, removing the whole linear thinking and thinking of the system as a whole. And so the value of the dollar does go beyond just that sort of transactional meat, feed me, right? So let's talk about the meat from the U.S. too. As you mentioned, 85% is imported.
Well, 85% of the beef available comes from one of 4 companies. So imports would be sort of a separate issue.
Got it.
When Dad built this company in the early 2000s, if product was to be labeled product of the USA, the animal had to be born, raised, and slaughtered in the United States. Around 2015, country of origin labeling was rescinded, and the animals no longer had to be born, raised, and slaughtered in the United States. We saw imported product show up in supermarkets that we were serving with product labeled product of the USA, but the meat had been imported. So it caused us to say, how is that happening? And the way the laws were written was that if any value had been added whatsoever, if that became a product of the USA. So big multinational companies started importing meat from other companies, grinding it or repackaging it, and then labeling that product as product of the USA. And that was probably, and continues to be, one of the hardest barriers of entry for farmers wanting to farm like we do at White Oak Pastures, because the cost of doing things in the United States is far more higher than the cost of doing things not in the United States.
Right.
You think about the textile industry, you think about the automotive industry, so much of that has been moved to a place where the cost of production is much less. And so that model was just replicated, but in meat. And so today you find product, that's derived from an animal that never breathed a breath of American air, being labeled as product of the USA. But there is hopefully some light at the end of that tunnel. Recently, there's been a ruling that should come into play in January of 2026.
Right.
That says that if a product is to be labeled product of the USA, the animal has to be born, raised, and slaughtered in the United States.
Right.
So, the good news is there's light at the end of the tunnel. The bad news is 16 or 18 months away.
Yeah, and I know, and we talked about this a little bit. I'm like, it's not hard to print a label or unprint it, or not unprint it, just not print it, and not put the U.S. label on it. Like maybe their initial thought was like, 14 months, it'll give people to make that transition. But the transition is very simple. Nobody has to redo their whole, farming strategy or protocols. It's just not printing a label.
Lobbyists are incredibly influential with bureaucrats. So I count us as being very fortunate. They changed the rule. Admittedly, that it should be quicker, but if it'll just happen, it'll go a long way.
Right.
That change Jenny was talking about really adversely affected our earnings. When they changed that rule on Product of the USA, we went from being quite profitable to not being very profitable, but we survived it. And a lot of other grass-fed beef companies did not survive it. So it's a lot of damage was done by that.
Yeah, and I think, it's important, not that, I think, you guys have mentioned this before too, not that there's a problem with imported beef, meaning like, oh, there's nothing wrong with, that. It's just the transparency of it, and it kind of goes back to just, our health even. Just, it's like, if we know the process, or if we know what was going into our food, maybe our choices would be different, and we can be more intentional about where we choose to get our foods. And when we do vote, meaning we pay for this meat that comes from one of these 4 to 6 companies that is getting beef imported and labeling it US, we're paying for this type of I guess lies, if you will.
Production system.
Greenwashing is.
Greenwashing, thank you. Yeah, and so I don't know about you guys, but I want to know exactly, where my food is coming from. And also it just supports the ecosystem, your local community. It supports, your nutrition, your family's nutrition, and local farmers and things in our food system where we vote for transparency. So White Oak Pastures, not only do you guys have, beautiful 100% grass-fed cattle, but maybe let's talk about the meats kind of that you guys do have too as well. Talking about ecosystem and biodiversity, we have pigs out here, and we have lamb and sheep. What else do we have on the farm?
Well, when I was an industrial cattleman, it was monocultural. I only had cattle, and I was very happy with that because I didn't need the symbiosis that comes from having other species. If I had a plant growing in my pasture my cows wouldn't eat, I just sprayed it with a herbicide, and so on. When I gave up using pesticides, I had weed species growing up in my pastures that the cows wouldn't eat. So I got other species. I added sheep first, later hogs, later goats, later poultry. Rabbits, that's very small, but and it really in a symbiotic way benefited the effort. The productivity of the whole farm went up by adding these other species.
Yep. And so once again, though I love what you guys do here on the farm too, it's just that I resonate with your core values too. It's just, you can still take every single day or every minute of the day and just, be almost, I call it the white belt mindset. And I say that because I'm a martial artist. So it's like you go in, you're always going to be a white belt. You're never just going to be a black belt, just knowing that you know everything about the farm. It's like every day is different, and you're willing to learn and even, be open to that education on your own farm. And so the progression and that mindset of just always working, with nature in a positive way and being open to it teaching you something is really something too that I feel also extends the value of my dollar, because I'm, supporting your mindset as well, because this isn't just about me today, it's about our future. So really appreciate that, as it also relates to my health and wellness. Look, what else do we have going on here too? We have tours, and we have, what else?
So tours and lodging. We've got a really great restaurant. One of the biggest projects we have going on now is expanding our sheep operation to grazing under solar panels. So there is, a solar company, Silicon Ranch, who's purchased several thousand acres around here, and where they would normally work hard to keep vegetation low, so that the panels operate optimally, they've given us an opportunity to graze underneath those panels. So it's been a real great opportunity to expand our lamb operation. And there's not a tremendous amount of domestically produced lamb. So we're excited about those being processed later this year and early 2025.
Amazing. Yeah, I absolutely love lamb. Like, I don't know, my body just really appreciates it, and it's so hard to find, like, here in the U.S. I just found a spot in Texas that, you know, this woman, I think she was from, not Ukraine, I can't remember, but anyway, she's growing lamb and stuff on the farm, and she does it really right. She has some really delicious lamb come out of her farm. So I'm excited about that. And for some reason in California, actually, they have more of that. And so I'm not sure the history of why. Maybe you guys do.
Well, west of the Mississippi, there's not much lamb in the country. As I think Jenny said, 85% of it's imported. New Zealand and Australia primarily. Prior to World War II, there were sheep all over the country, and a lot more domestic production. A lot of speculation about World War II. People haven't eaten mutton. I don't know what did it, but east of Mississippi, all the large sheep operations went away. We're gonna have about 3,000 mama sheep ewes, and it'll be probably the largest east of Mississippi, one of the largest east of the Mississippi. In the West, probably more cultural diversity has kept more lamb production there.
Interesting. Okay, so one more question as far as it relates to consumer. We talked about, going to the store and just, looking at the labels and maybe just seeing who creates it, going to have these conversations, with their producers, and if not, maybe going on websites to look at their local farmer. Those are ways that they can do this. We talked about kind of the financial aspect of it and, the value of the dollar, and, maybe it might be cheaper meat initially, but it will be long-term costs later for us. How can people start to make a little change apart from, I'm going to get a deep freezer, I'm going to buy a quarter cow, because that's ideal, right? To buy, meat in bulk, it's cheaper in the long term, but, it's costly up front. So what little steps can people do to maybe start to make a change? And similar to maybe how you've grown into a regenerative farm, right? You had to make steps. You couldn't do it overnight. So I think as from a human and our, just how we can either purchase it or just the mindset, what are some little steps we can take?
I think just generally being aware of the things you're purchasing. I think that, consumers, get label fatigue, they get shopping fatigue. You're trying to shop and you've got one or two or three or five kids, that are extremely distracting. I think the first step is just understanding what you're buying. And then I think the next step is incrementally, where you can, choose to support farms that produce food the way you want it to be. It might not be that you can just swap over and tomorrow buy everything regenerative, buy everything, from a farm, like White Oak Pastures. I think doing it when you can is important. And hopefully, over time, you'll recognize the true value of what farms like these provide, be it, great tasting product in production systems raised with an emphasis on animal welfare and land regeneration, tied back to building communities around food. And so it probably won't be an all or nothing decision tomorrow, but I think that becoming aware of what you are purchasing and how you are spending your money, and then making small incremental changes when you can is a great place to start.
I agree. And similar, again, I know there's a lot of parallels I'm drawing to into health and, just sort of regenerative agriculture and farming. But similar to our health, it's like, not overnight do people like, there's a lot of us who would be like, Monday, I'm starting, but like, it doesn't work out.
First day of the month.
January 1st, you're like, shoot, I already screwed up. You know, I mean, some people can go to 0 to 60. I know, like, I have that personality, but others, you know, may need to shave a little off here and there as to not just like jolt the system with just such a shock factor, like whether it be your body or your financials in your wallet. And so I think if you can kind of approach this just like you would nutrition, you know, then you start to see, especially in your own body too, if you start to feel better, you want to do more of that.
That's right.
And it's the same thing when you're, you know, buying or supporting, you know, your local farms, and you see the quality of the meat, and then, you know, you see the quality and the taste. And then it does translate to, you know, health and wellness and all these things that you don't notice right away. Just as soon as you bite into it, it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm healed from, you know, histamine issues or whatever we talked about. You notice it over time, and then priorities start to change. Budget, like, you know, allocating budget starts to adjust and change in a very, you know, in a healthy cadence rather. So I appreciate the insight into that, and you know, you have 2 kids as well too, and I know that, you know, I'm single and I don't like, I mean, I guess I have my dog to feed, but I know that for, you know, it becomes a bigger issue too with, to feed a family as well. And so there are other things, like maybe if you want to name off a quick, few recipes that you do, or just maybe choices of meat that you do pick in order to keep the cost a little bit lower.
You know, we go through the most ground beef.
Yep.
You know, the things that are easiest for us to throw together after a full day of work and a full day of school with baseball practice and whatever else we have going on are, you know, hamburgers, sliders, spaghetti, tacos, you know, enchiladas. Ground beef is kind of the gateway drug to eating this way. You know,
Right.
It's easy to cook. It's easy to thaw. It goes, you know, hell, you can do everything with it. So ground beef is sort of our fallback.
Yeah, I love that. What's your favorite cut? I don't think I ever asked you that. What's your favorite, like, meal to have?
Beef,
But what kind of beef? Like, is it steak?
It's all good.
Yeah.
You know, I love ground beef.
Yeah.
You know, I love steak and roast. It's all good to me. But I'm a beef guy.
Yeah, and I think ground beef is, it's kind of underrated as to, from a nutritional standpoint, right? You're getting all kind of those bits and nose to tail, and truly something that you guys are really pushing for is just nose to tail. So I love how you have, you know, not only your beef products, but your like tallow products, your leather handbags, really like leaning into that nose to tail.
I'll say this, ground beef has really gotten slammed in terms of quality by the industrialization. You know, when you slaughter corn-fed cattle, feedlot cattle, you get a tremendous amount of product that's called 50% trim, 50% fat, 50% lean. And it's basically an inedible product. I mean, you know, you don't. What do you do with that?
I don't know.
And but it's a tremendous amount of it produced.
Yep.
So what has evolved is big beef companies buy trim cattle or beef from trim cattle, which is really, really lean red meat that's barely edible with most American recipes. And they blend that trim with 50% fat. And that's what the ground beef is that you buy. When you see cheap ground beef, that's what it is. And they've literally taken 2 inedible products and put them together and made ground beef. It's gotten ground beef a bad name. People love our ground beef because it's ground, marketable cuts of meat.
And does it come from the same herd?
It does.
So the ground beef that you find in grocery stores?
Come from different continents. Not the same herd, not the same continent.
No. And to me, I mean, again, it's like, I'm here to just say, like, this is what it is. And if you still want to choose the ground beef at the counter in the grocery store, go for it. But if it comes from
I think one of the reasons that we talk about ground beef is we can demonstrate a difference more clearly with our ground beef than we can with anything else we sell, because it has been so degraded in the commodity market.
What's the difference like between like the color, the taste, or just kind of all of it?
Yeah, it'll be, ours would probably be a little redder, more beefy tasting. You know, I'm probably not good enough at culinary
Descriptions.
What was that word?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
What is it? That's okay,
Yeah.
you know. But I think that, you know, again, the nose to tail is amazing. And I know that, you know, you sell organs a la carte here. We also created ground beef together because I think organs are a huge part of, they're one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, and so to actually blend that into ground beef, I created a Vitality blend here in collaboration with White Oak Pastures.
You did it.
No,
You told
I
us
mean,
what
you
to
guys,
mix up.
no, but I mean, without you guys, you know, where would it be? So I think it's like, that's called the 50-50 blend for sure. And so that has liver and heart and spleen and kidney in there, and I call it the Vitality blend because it increases and enhances performance, as well as, you know, those who are low on iron, which there's a huge iron deficiency, can benefit from this because the spleen and the liver give you a great source of heme iron. So once again, it's also, you don't find that really, you know, in the stores and commodity beef, you know, that are willing to use nose to tail the whole animal. So less waste and just more nutrition in the end for you guys. So, well, for all of us really. So thanks again. And I really appreciate like what you guys are doing here, but more so than ever, it's just, again, the transparency. It's the having these conversations, because this is what's important, to just educate the community on what's going on, right? I don't want to not be in the know. So I'm really, really thankful for you guys.
Well, this is your second trip, and we truly both hope that everybody that sees this
Yes.
will also come and visit.
I know, I hope so. So just don't forget, I put a link down below, whiteoakpastures.com. They are a wonderful resource for you just to like, to look at, to use as a guidance, to just explore more within your community too. So they, you know, if you guys want to come visit and check it out, you've got lodging here, you've got tours. I'm about to go for a horseback riding tour. They obviously have a beautiful restaurant on site that only uses their tallow, so no seed oils or anything like that. And it's real food. It's, you know, vegetables and fruits from your garden, an amazing chef, and all of these things. So you guys are really kind of the real deal in the whole package, and awesome. And where else can we find you guys? You guys are on Instagram, and anywhere else? Do you have podcasts or anything like that?
We don't do a podcast. We are on Instagram and, of course, Facebook. We're starting to put more stuff up on our YouTube.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
definitely check us out there.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. See you next time.